Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and work with what is an incredible panel that we're going to have today. All of our panelists have been really successful in engaging students in computing and maker education. And I'm really excited to hear their stories and what fire they have that led them to inspire and mentor in their classrooms. I think we'll hear a lot today about what they did in the classroom, what they were able, how they were able to achieve, even in the tumultuous year that we've had, and what they're planning to do going forward and what lessons they may have to share. I'm just going to jump right in and ask each of the panelists a bit about, what pulled you into computer science and maker education. So, Kathleen, I wanted to start with you. I grew up in Morris County, so I was really excited to hear your story. And I'm really curious, how have you been able to manage all of your courses? Parsippany started with one course with 10 students. Now you have 7 computer science courses. What is your fire? What have you done to engage so many students in computer science?
Basically, my philosophy is that the real world is very important. The real world of college, the real world of jobs, and computer science ties in so nicely with that. When I see the different concepts that are taught in all the different courses that I teach, I see that there are things for everyone. There are hardware courses, there are software courses, there are umbrella courses like CSP. And I feel that this gives the students an opportunity to learn computational thinking. And that's going to tie in with everything they have. So in my opinion, every student should be taking a computer science course in their high school years to prepare them for college, as well as whatever career they decide to go into.
Thanks, Kathy. So, Kyle, how about you? You started teaching as a candidate at 18 years old, and you've already been in computer science and web development education for over 5 years. What is your fire? What drives you to reach all of your students?
It's a combination of remembering where I was in the place of the students. I grew up in New York City, just like many of my kids have come up as well. And I'm also a first generation American. My parents are not from this country. So I relate to my kids very deeply, and I found a lot of success through technology education, going to a career in technical education, high school, and receiving the same education that I try to give my students now. And I try to impart on all of the kids that come through my classroom that this is a great way to move up on the ladder, to bring success for you and your family. And that's just the impact that I think that I have on these kids really drives me every day to keep doing what I do.
So moving out of the tri-state area and down to Florida, we have our InfoMaker Awards 2021 winner, Meghan. So tell me, how have you been so successful telling stories to inspire students to innovate and use technology?
I think it started, obviously several years ago, and I wanted to make sure that students in my school and my classroom were prepared for post-secondary success in either a trade school or in a university. So I started to incorporate as much maker education, STEM lab activities, higher tech activities into my science classroom and into an after-school program. But this year, it was in particular an indoor hydroponic garden that we started that really kind of unified a lot of teachers in my school together to work together to incorporate more maker education. I think kids intuitively like to grow things. And so now our plan is to automate these gardens and work on them across multiple disciplines.
Cool. So for all of you, I think one place where I was really impressed was the way you're able to connect the learning that you're doing in the classroom to greater goals and longer term goals with careers, incorporating some of a corporate voice, or incorporating those career goals, but really relevant career goals to your students. How have you been able to do that effectively? Kathleen, starting again with you.
the way that I do it is through code.org has had these Hour of Code for many years. And that's a nice program. And even at the high school level, you have some students who have never had computer science and don't know how to program. So it is a great introduction to computer science. But because I teach computer science, when it comes to that Hour of Code and the CS Ed Week, I'm kind of at a loss. Well, in looking at it, they have speakers and they offer their professionals that will offer to come, and they don't come, but they will Skype in or Zoom in or whatever the case may be. So every year I get usually one, sometimes two, depending on how many classes I have. Teachers, I've had one from Pixar. She told the students all about how she worked on Finding Dory, I think was the one she was working on. And the kids were fascinated and they wanted to know all the stars that she had met in this process and where she came from. Where did she go to school? She went to a school in Ohio. How did she get into Pixar Studios? We had one from Microsoft, and that woman told us about how she was an electrical engineer with her master's. And before she finished, she had a job at Microsoft. And the students were fascinated. Why would you take a job in software when you've done electrical engineering? Or why would they want you if that was your background? And she said, because I know how to solve problems. And that's something that I find. I also find my own students will come back. They'll talk to the kids when they're in college. A lot of them will come back freshmen, like when they're in winter break. Can I speak to the class? And they have a lot to say. They have a lot to say about what's happening in college and what they're going to find and what courses were good and which courses were bad and how difficult or how easy it was. So that's the way that I find reaching out to corporate can help them to see really what it's like to be out there.
Cool. That's really interesting. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, so my teacher training took a bit of a non-traditional path. I spent a few years immersed in an industry setting, working in actual fields to teach what I was working with. So I cherish that time that I spent in the industry a lot. It gives me a unique perspective for my students directly from the industry. So I'm able to tell them like, hey, when I was working with these people, like this is the salary they made. This is what a regular day on the job looked like. These are all the benefits. Like I worked with people just like this. They went to schools just like you're going to schools and did similar programs, and you can find the same success. I think having that first person knowledge, that first person experience coming from the teacher themselves is extremely valuable. But even for teachers who haven't had the opportunity to immerse themselves in the industry in a job setting, it's also super important to keep up to date with what's going on in the computer science field through online newsletters, signing up, listening to people speak about the new developments, because things are always changing, especially in website development, which is my specific field. Things are changing all the time. There's a new framework. There's a new something that employers want from you to learn. So it's super important. If you aren't able to speak from the job experience yourself, that you stay up to date. There's tons of resources for people to take advantage of. But in addition to that, we also partner with organizations. We work with a great one called Code Nation. They also help coordinate career panels and have companies come in and speak to the kids. And we also have volunteers that volunteer their own time working at places like Google, Facebook, independent agencies around the city in New York City that they come and they also speak to the kids and relate their knowledge about what the students are learning versus what they do in the field. So all these tools are super important. I think our students get a pretty good idea of the benefits that education in computer science can bring.
So following up with that a little bit, one of the things I'm really interested in is how you're able to keep up to date with all of this, right? Because if you're working on web programming, as you point out, they've got all these frameworks, all these things are changing, and you're working with folks in industry. Do the people in industry help in some ways in keeping what you're doing compelling and, if not current, at least relevant?
Yes, industry we have a number of partners that do help keep the curriculum up to date, but it's mostly at least for me personally, it's a labor of love. I really love teaching science. I've always loved computers from a young age. So I naturally find myself keeping up to date with things that are going on in the field. And I always try to find like new things to incorporate into my curriculum. So if I see that CSS grid, for example, is a relatively new thing that is being like implemented widely. Next year, I'm going to be implementing a CSS grid lesson for the first time. I've never taught it before, but I know that it's something that employers are looking for. I know that it's pretty new, and kids have to learn it to be successful. So, industry helps a bit, but I really think if you want to be successful, you got to really like it, and you have to want to keep your knowledge current. A lot of programs, especially in New York City, end up falling behind and teaching stuff that unfortunately is not going to be of any use to students in the field if they are interested in pursuing this. So it's super important.
Thanks. So Meghan, similarly, you work as the science department chair, but you're also really in there developing so much, going above and beyond, what might expect in the course, but then doing it in a really compelling way. Are there ways you've been able to work with or, use industry to inspire in order to do the work that you've done?
Absolutely. So this year, we were able to offer industry certification exams to our students in our AP Environmental Science courses and our biotechnology courses. So we had over 100 students enrolled in our science classes, also earned these career and technical education certificates. And we worked hand in hand with some of the career programs in our school. So in our biotechnology class, students learn how to use a thermocycler. They learn how to run DNA samples. In our environmental science class, the kids were building hydroponic systems, monitoring the growth of the plants. And next year, we'll be expanding that to work with our veterinary academy, our culinary academy, our IT academy, and our finance academy. We also learned about different career opportunities within these different fields. So in biotechnology, you have research scientists, you have the people who calibrate the equipment, you have people who work on the stats and coding and working with the analysis of DNA, people who run the microarrays of DNA on computer programs. And so we were able to explore a lot of different career paths for them. And we also have a lot of guest speakers come into our classroom.
So this has been a pretty interesting year for all of us in so many ways, so many challenges. How would you describe your COVID year, if you have an adjective to describe that COVID year? And, how has that inspired you or changed at all what you're going to do going forward?
I think that it was a technical opportunity. I'm sorry, that's not one word, it's two words. But we learned so many different tools this year because we had to, and everyone had to learn them. And I think that when we walk away from this year, while we will not use all of them all the time, there will be definitely some carryover from this year, some of these tools. And I think it was good that the students saw those tools, because just like you have Zoom and you have a couple other different platforms that you can use to have meetings, you don't know what's going to be expected of you when you get into college or into your career. So it's nice that they have had the opportunities to use these tools, to try these tools. Students would suggest tools to me that other teachers had used and they found useful. I think it was a really a big testament to teachers, how we were able to adjust to this. And it didn't matter how technologically phobic you were, everybody kind of joined in and did that. So I think that that's one of the biggest things I'm going to carry with me is a different tool set than I had before.
It's very difficult for me to find a one-word adjective to describe the year that we've just been through. As you may or may not know, New York City was the early epicenter of the pandemic, and we were transitioned. School was closed. I think it was like a Friday, and we were given like 3 days to train to transform everything online. And then it was like, there you go. welcome to remote world. I do think that I will take away a lot from this year, the new tools that we've learned. For example, this one example always sticks out to me. We were able to host a career panel with a industry partner, and they got engineers to join in from all across the country on Zoom. So we had one engineer in San Francisco, another engineer in Chicago, another one all over the country. There was like a bunch of them. And they were able to all join in and meet with our class at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is super early for some people on the West Coast. And they were all able to join in and share their experiences. And by the end of that panel, the students were like, wow, this is so cool, mister. Like, my mind is blown. So I think that'll be great. And there are other tools, other examples I can think of going next year that will definitely benefit everybody. But for the most part, I'm just really looking forward to having the kids back in person.
Meghan, how about you? I imagine that COVID year put some pretty special constraints on maker education.
Yeah, that it did. I think that overcoming challenges is kind of the two words I would pick for this school year. I work at a Title I school where about 85 to 90% of our students are on free and reduced lunch every year. So our biggest hurdle was making sure that students had access to technology. That many of them didn't have computers really until about January or February. There was a lot of computers were on back order. It took a long time to get them. And so I think that one unexpected positive from this year was that I think that COVID really shone a spotlight on the inequalities that exist in more urban schools like mine when the kids don't have access to the same resources. But to counteract that, we sent home lab kits and lab materials, and we did lower tech activities so kids could log on with their phone and they can still, build, create, problem solve along with us. A few other things I think that we could take with us is we transitioned to like after school virtual tutoring and virtual clubs for kids. And I think that would really allow a lot more students to participate in some extra help after school if they didn't have to worry about transportation or if they had to help care for siblings in their homes.
I think one important challenge that we think about a lot at NSF, and I know the Infosys Foundation is also quite concerned about, is how do you broaden participation in computing? Particularly trying to think about how you're able to engage students from groups that are traditionally underrepresented in computing. And that's a broad set of the population, and it's really important both for those participants and for the field and our society as a whole. What are the things that you've done that you think have really helped in that area? Because that's something that really ties all of you, something that you've all done. So I'd love to hear from you about that.
My supervisor and I applied for and received a grant from CS for All, and we went down to Texas and with two other teachers from the middle school. We were able to work with them to talk about the underrepresented and how we can involve them in computer science. It was very eye-opening. It was very inspirational. Then we hit the pandemic. So it wasn't quite implemented the way we wanted to. But in the past, what I've done is when we come up to course selections, I will go and speak to some of the cultural clubs in our district. One of them is the African American Cultural Club. And I'll talk to them. I show them statistics. We have our CSTA, our local CSTA is great at giving us all the different statistics about, the different groups and what they are, how many of them are taking it and how many jobs are out there and how much money you can make. So I present all these to them. I've also looked into in my own classroom who I have in my classroom and how I can help them. At one point in time, I taught an intro class, which was in C, which is not the easiest language to learn. And then we did apps on top of it. Well, to start the class, I had two students who were autistic. And by changing the program, not giving them the curriculum that I was teaching, giving them another curriculum that they could kind of work on their own, they were able to do computer science. And they made it through. So by making adjustments, I think definitely, with the special education group, there are ways that they can learn it, and they are going to have to address technology in whatever job or career they choose. So those are the ways that I'm trying to reach out to different groups to bring them in, to show women that, women's another group that, that there are opportunities out there and they can do this. So by trying to reach out to all the different groups, I think that's the way I handle it.
So Kyle, how about you? You've done so much to work on equity and access in your classrooms. How have you been so successful, or what do you think your successes have been?
Sure. From the top, our school is also a Title I school. Our school is in a very unique neighborhood. A lot of low-income families, a lot of Spanish-speaking families. You name it. Our school population is extremely diverse. I put this in my application, but our school is, as a whole, an underrepresented community. So all the way from the top, I think to engage these different communities, it's extremely important to have high quality CTE programs like ours. In the schools that are in these neighborhoods, to recruit kids, to show them the benefits of an education. I think it's also super important that teachers and the school staff represent the demographics of the student population. And I think even if you aren't able to have staff that represent the student population, encourage your students that, you can go into the industry. Or if you master this and you want to give back, you can follow the path like I did and end up teaching this. I think these two things have helped us impart a computer science education on a great number of kids. And I can tell you firsthand that a lot of kids who have come from our school go on to study computer science or go on to work straight in the industry. Some skip college and they're like, I just want to go and do the thing right away. And it's really an incredible thing to see. And it attests our CTE programs and our school staff really for engaging these kids.
One thing I think that's really interesting that you've done is in the work itself, right? You've thought about accessibility, right? So if you're going to design web applications, how do you make them accessible? I'm just curious, how and why do you do that?
So these things, addressing like web accessibility and making sure that your curriculum is open up to everybody, these are things that are, especially web accessibility, it's a huge topic that's coming up now for companies. They're looking for people who are specialized in accessibility to implement these systems into their applications and websites and such. But beyond what the industry is looking for, I think when some students might not have the ability to see this right off the bat, but I think when students experience that this curriculum and what they're learning is inclusive and it benefits other people, the work that they'll be doing, I think it motivates them more to try to strive for a career in this field. So I think it's hard to tie down the exact science behind it. I feel like 50% of it is intentional effort, and then 50% of it is just like it happens.
Meghan, how about you? How have you been able to address equity in your courses?
Well, for the past 2 years, I was an advocate with the Society for Science. So we were focused on increasing independent student research in underrepresented populations. So we had students present research at the University of Florida for the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium before COVID. And this year we had students participate in virtual science research competitions. I also am a really strong advocate. I think that every kid in a K through 12 school in this country should have access to a computer during the school day and should have access to a computer at home to make sure that they can keep up with their more affluent peers. And so until we get that, I think we have to, all of us, work together to keep ensuring that kids have equal access to technology. From the beginning of my teaching career, I realized that we didn't have the resources in our school to prepare kids for success in a post-secondary institution. And so I worked really hard at writing grants and outfitting a STEM lab. And this year, to make sure kids were still able to build at home, I checked out small robotics kits so kids could work with Arduinos and code with Scratch, and they were able to do it from home. I had students check out a 3D printer like it was a library book, just so they can use and explore and learn about it at home. We also did some in-school STEM days last year before COVID, so students who weren't exposed to the resources in our STEM lab or who had never built a circuit or seen a Raspberry Pi were able to kind of explore that during the day to see if they were interested in it.
So one final question for all of you. So what tips would you have for other teachers who are attending the Pathfinder Summer Institute? So just give me, based on your experience, what would you like other teachers to do going forward?
I would hope that teachers will reach out and invite people to take computer science, because some people think that they can't, they think that they won't like it, but until they try it, they won't know. I have one student who took CSP who said, I really don't like the programming, but everything else was very interesting. I said, okay. So this year, as he's graduating, I said, do you want to revisit your statement? Because he's in my AP CSA, and he went through all the programming classes we had, and he's going on to computer science. So to be able to offer that to somebody who maybe didn't consider that, I think that is the best thing you can do.
The tips that have always worked best for me during my time as an educator is one, be yourself, be approachable, inviting to students. The second thing is be super enthusiastic about everything you're doing, but especially computer science. This is a field that can change your life if you commit to it. If you're a student and you're in a bad situation at the moment, a dedication to a career in computer science can change your life, can change your family's life, and it's super important to drive that point home. And the third thing is anybody can learn how to code. Anybody. You just have to have the patience and the dedication to achieve what you were setting out for, and it is possible. And I think it's really important for teachers to drive that home. Anybody's life can be changed with a career in computer science.
I think that if you are interested in starting maker education in your classroom or in your school, just to start with whatever resources you have and whatever you feel confident using. The materials and the equipment that I have now, they were 10 years in the making. It took us a long time to build up the programs that we have. But some of the first activities we did were building things like catapults out of popsicle sticks and activities that weren't really designed for high school students. They were designed for much younger. But it was about building confidence, building student interest, and just getting them to work together and solve problems and be creative.
Well, thank you. And, thanks, Kathy, Kyle, Meghan. That was really great. I really appreciate you all taking the time for this. And I hope that everyone here at the at Pathfinders finds it as valuable as I did.